Welcome to our next instalment of Cycling Weekly's Why I Ride series. And today I'm joined by Chris Hall, who I would term an ultra endurance athlete.
My name's Chris Hall, and what do? I ride bikes far, relatively fast, and I guess do a lot of that for charity. That's kind of the easiest way of explaining what I do, I guess.
What would you term it? Like ultra distance riding or like ultra endurance?
I would probably go with ultra distance, to be honest with you, because the sort of cycling I do, the range would probably be from like 12 hours, 24 hours, a week, a month. So I would call it ultra distance because even in that 12 hours, you could be covering 300 miles. You could be covering over 24 hours, 500 plus miles. And if it's over a week, it could be, 1,000, etc., etc. It's slow enough that I can be competitive. That's basically it. So the first thing I did was I rode around Richmond Park for 24 hours. And that was for a children's school called the Pace Centre, which is a school for 107 kids with cerebral palsy and motor based disorders. And I did that and I felt pretty good at the end of it. I'd only really sort of started getting into cycling then. I hadn't really been riding a lot or much, but for me, it was about raising funds for a charity. And that was like the first point where I was like, okay, maybe I can actually compete, so to speak, in the longer distances. And I think that kind of gave me that bug, which got shot down almost instantly, because I went pretty quickly after, went to race my first National 24 and didn't finish. First year I did it, I think it got down to -3 at night. Horrific rainfall, just awful. I think I'd managed 14 hours and I'd run out of dry kit, completely run out of motivation to do anything, and just was like, okay, I'm not in a good way, I'm gonna stop. And ultimately, it's like one of those things where I sort of stumbled across it because I was like, yeah, it sounds good, let's just ride for 24 hours and see what happens. My most recent challenge, I called it the Nuts and Bolts Challenge. This Nuts and Bolts Challenge originally was riding from the most western point of England to the most eastern point of England as fast as I could. So Land's End to Ness Point. And the original plan was to do this during Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. And I say the original plan because the original plan didn't go to plan. I got about 400 kilometers into the ride. The total ride distance was about 700 kilometers. And I got attacked on the bike. I had some rather jolly men decide that they liked the look of the bike, attempted to take the bike. And so we pulled the challenge. We parked up in a random lay-by. We had a camper van. The guys filming were using this camper van so they could rest, and we slept. Got up in the morning and my head just wasn't there, wasn't in it. Really still felt incredibly shaken up, and the film crew turned around and was like, that's it, we're canning it. And we'll go back to scratch and reassess whether we can do this challenge. There's something that relates very well to Movember about talking about vulnerability and me feeling vulnerable in that situation and trying to be as open and honest about how I felt. And I like to think that that came across when I've talked about it. Let's just do it again. So we did. It was, I think, 3 weeks later, started again at Land's End, some crazy time in the morning, jumped on the bike, rode all the way through, and ended up at Ness Point at it was 29 hours and 43 minutes later.
Distance?
I think it was 694 kilometers with about 9,000 meters of climbing. That moment at the finish is why I do it, is knowing that I've completed it, it's raised a load of money for an incredible cause, and it's done.
Do you think that was is that the lowest low you've had on a bike?
That's up there. That's definitely up there. The other one that was, there's probably two other ones, to be honest with you. One of them would be the first National 24 I did when I pulled out, because I went into it, a bit confident, thinking I'd be all right and be able to finish, and pulled out because of the conditions. I ended up getting pneumonia, and then I got shingles, and I was basically bedbound, I think, for 3 or 4 months to get over both of that. So that's pretty rubbish. But you know, you learn a lot about yourself in those situations. I'd say another one that was pretty bad was at the Atlas Mountain Race. I definitely wasn't on the right bike for it. I sort of went out there on a gravel bike, and it's definitely much more of a mountain bike race. And I crashed quite badly out there, and it was not long. I went and did that race not long after having been hit by a car and having a slip disc. So crashed quite badly out there, and definitely caused a few issues with that disc again. So that was pretty low, realizing I was riding along with a knackered back off-road. And that was a race where I kind of had to go, do you know what? Hands up, I can't finish this. It is what it is. I've got so far. Oh well. And I'd probably say those two, along with the situation that happened on the nuts and bolts ride, are probably the 3 points which have really challenged me mentally. There has obviously been other ones. Things happen on every single challenge. They always do. But you learn how to manage that. You really do. The more you do it, the more experience you gain, and the more you can kind of call on that as well.
And in your motivation, say on the nuts and bolts ride, you called it off and then you're like, I'm going to go back and do this again. Mm-hmm. Where do you find the motivation to do that? What is it that you draw that from?
For me, with that challenge, it's the charity aspect of it. And that was the motivation to redo it. It wasn't so much doing it for the sake of doing it. It was doing it for a reason.
Spoken briefly about technical setup for Atlas Mountain Race. Let's talk a little bit more about technical setup in general. Mm-hmm. What is your first choice of bike? And most of the challenges you do road, so you pick a road bike, or do you pick a gravel bike?
Comfort plays so much into it. I mean, with the 24-hour time trials, it is a time trial bike because it's the fastest bike you can get. But comfort's still incredibly important in that. So you're just going to ride the widest tyre your time trial bike can fit for clearance, because it just makes a bit of difference with your comfort. Maybe make the position a bit more relaxed, for example. But for most of the other things, I'd probably choose a gravel bike. The reason being is, one, tyre clearance. You can fit a wider road tyre on there, which is just going to give you a bit of comfort. And the other thing is little things like, is there any mount points on the bike? You can mount something like a bento box on the top of this is really useful. And then comfort as well. I generally find with gravel bikes, I find them more comfortable quite often. They're just a bit more forgiving just because of the nature of the terrain they're going over. Also, I guess gear ratios. With things like the nuts and bolts ride, you know, the 2 attempts I used 2 different bikes for it. The first attempt was on a Cervelo R3, which is a great bike, it's a fantastic bike. But the first quarter of it, or first third of it, I guess, being so up and down, I was finding that I was just grinding on the gears. So going to the Aspero 5, you know, with the GRX Di2 just meant I've got a bit more range of gears. So you can keep your legs spinning instead of having to just grind on the gear a bit. And if you can keep your legs spinning, they're going to stay a bit fresher. I guess they're the kind of the main things for me. And yeah, I probably would sway towards a gravel bike. And I think a big part of it is the comfort aspect of it and the gear ratios, to be perfectly honest.
I guess finally, what's next?
Fingers crossed, Badlands, Trans-Pyrenees. The problem with those kind of races is it's the international aspect, and they will happen, and also if I think that it's right for me to go out there and travel. If I don't think it's right, it's fine. We can do that, just delay it a year. It's not a problem. What I've actually really liked about the situation we're in right now is it's forced me to explore the UK, and there's some incredible riding if you get out of the cities and go to, as you know yourself, in Scotland, Wales, wherever it is, Peak District, Lake District, there's some incredible cycling. And for me, not necessarily being able to travel has forced me to explore more of the UK and try and think up these challenges that are UK focused, which means it gives the opportunity for people to join on them as well. Especially if it's charity focused in the UK, you can open that engaging conversation to try and bring people into the story and the reasons why I'm doing it, and fundamentally it ends up bringing in more money for the causes.
So there you go, that has been our conversation with Chris Hall. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. If you have enjoyed this conversation, then please do give us a thumbs up, subscribe to Cycling Weekly YouTube channel, and leave us a comment in the comments section below, where I'm sure Chris will be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, also, let us know if you've done any long distance events as well. We'd love to hear what you've been up to. In the meantime, keep an eye out for our next installment of our Why I Ride series, and we'll see you then.